I am Dungeon Thrasher Lenny Blade, and this is the Dungeons and Thrashers show, and more specifically, this is the Adventures in Middle-earth, and this is the last episode of the reviews anyways, episode 13, and we are taking a look at the Rohan region guide. As you can see, it was never released in physical form, so I just printed the PDF and I put it in this very masculine binder here. So we're going to take a look at this and see how you can use it in your campaign. Let's go. So we're down back at the table here, and this region guide not only covers the lands and people of Rohan and the surrounding, Riddermark and so on, it also includes the Fangon Forest, which gets its own chapter, and of course, you got it, Isengard, and the infamous Tower of Orthanc, and much, much more in this awesome last entry in the Adventures in Middle-earth setting for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition by Cubicle 7. Now, they lost the license after this product was even printed physically. So now it's the Free League that has the license, and they are putting out the Lord of the Rings for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and the One Ring 2nd edition, which both of which I will review later on. As you can see, I just printed my PDF and put it in a binder, and it works fine, I guess. The book starts off with a history of Rohan, of course, like all the other supplements do. And following up with the regions of the Mark, like Edoras, which comes complete with a map of Meduseld, and the village itself. Now remember, in 2960, King Thengil's more famous son, Theoden, was only 12 years old. If you remember, Theoden was the king of Rohan in the Lord of the Rings books. But he doesn't play an important role in this supplement, but there are rules for opening Edoras as a sanctuary and getting King Thengil, his dad, as a patron. There are no less than 3 new Fellowship Phase undertakings in Edoras, sparring with the King's Guard, honoring the kings of old, and gain favor in the Golden Hall. Now, these sound very thematic and really cool. Unfortunately, none of them are interesting enough to go into detail, unfortunately. Lost opportunity there. Harrowdale is next, and yes, you got it, the Path of the Dead. So, how do you get into the Path of the Dead, or onto the Path of the Dead, I should say? Well, first you come to a standing stone in the woods that will direct you to the Dark Door. And already there, at the standing stone, you must make a corruption saving throw at DC 15. Now, approaching the Dark Door itself requires a DC 20 corruption saving throw. If you fail the first one, this one also fails automatically. Going through the door itself punishes the company with another shadow point each, with no chance of a save. This is not a place for mortal men to venture, obviously. And every hour spent upon the Paths of the Dead requires an increasingly difficult corruption saving throw, starting at 20, with an increment of 2 per hour, so 20, 22, 24, and so forth. Any failure, get this, inflicts 2 shadow points. Yeah, and it also forces the heroes to flee from the path. But without spoiling too much for potential players, there may be some cool buried hoards and artifacts there. Now, obviously, this is not a place for low-level characters, or even high-level characters if you already have a couple of shadow points each. Go and heal up. Heal your shadow points before you go to the Paths of the Dead, because it's a pretty tough place. But cool. So, if you are a high-level party, I would definitely recommend checking the Paths of the Dead out. Next up is the Plains of Rohan, where there's a new Fellowship Phase undertaking, Go Riding with the Horse Lords, which is a very thematic undertaking, but unfortunately you can only gain a horsemanship dice, which is used, you can add a die when you're doing like animal handling stuff. You can also get information and gifts, but these gifts are not mechanical, they just have like gold values. After that comes the East Fold, which also has tons of info on NPCs, places and events. It also comes with its own Fellowship Phase undertaking. Go hunting in the Everholt. Everholt is a portion of the Firian Woods. Now from this undertaking you can gain hunt dice, which you can use if you have the role as a hunter when you're journeying. It's one of those dice where you can add to any skill check. And other small boons like advantage on audiences, etc. Alright, so next up is the Westfold. And it's very similar to all the other chapters here. It's filled with interesting NPCs and places, which I will not go into detail here, with one exception, because you know you want it. What do you think about when you hear Westfold? Of course, Helm's Deep. This is very well detailed with a map. And as far as reading material goes, like if you're never gonna play this, if you're just reading because you're a Tolkien nerd, this is my favorite part of the whole supplement. There are 3 Fellowship Phase undertakings here that you can do during your Fellowship Phase. You can climb the White Mountains, gaze upon the glittering caves, and if you remember the glittering caves, that's where Gimli and Legolas sort of had a moment in the book. And you can enter the Hornburg, which is the main keep of Helm's Deep. These are all mega Tolkien-esque, and I really recommend if you're a lore master steering your players towards doing these, because I really enjoyed at least reading about all of these, so definitely recommended. After the Westfold, we've got the Great River, which obviously refers to Anduin, which starts in the Grey Mountains and it ends around, southern Ithilien or so. And the northern part of Anduin is described very well in the Rovanian region guide, complete with NPCs and notable places, as it is here. And I was thinking like a cool adventure could see the company travel the length of the river, starting at the Grey Mountains and ending somewhere in southern Ithilien, visiting cool places and NPCs along the way, because there are a lot. And that should provide plenty of adventure seeds. Maybe even a whole campaign. Maybe mapping out the river for a cartographer or something. There's one new Fellowship Phase undertaking, Guard the Crossings, which is pretty cool. You can gain patrol dice. These are D4s, which you can add to any roll during the journey, if you've taken the role as a lookout or a scout, or preparation dice, which are extra dice you can use in combat. And don't tell your players, but there's also a small chance, if you roll a 20, to meet Saruman, Gandalf, or Tengil King. Engage them in an audience and facilitate an undertaking later to gain them as patrons. The second new Fellowship Phase undertaking in this area is the Hills of Seeing and Hearing, which is Amon Hen and Amon Lao. And you can study the seat of either of these hills, and you will have a vision or you can hear something. An important event somewhere that will have a great impact on the world. So you have to make an insight or a perception check at DC 20 for this. Now, this could be pretty cool and it's great for immersion, but it's one of those, do this or fail and use your Fellowship Phase undertaking. So you lose your whole Fellowship Phase if you fail on this roll, which is kind of a bummer, but cool nevertheless. On top of that, if you roll a 1, you add 3 to the hunt score if you're using the Io Mordor rules from the Rivendell region guide, because you draw it's sort of reverse everything, so you become sort of outside the window, you know what I mean? So people are looking at you, so you draw the attention of the shadow. Next is, of course, the Gap of Rohan, and finally, yes, a whole chapter on the Fangorn Forest, where you can read up on the history of the first, second, and third age of the Fangorn Forest. The Ents are detailed, of course. There is a small blurb about the lost Entwives and whether they actually did leave Middle-earth or if they can be found again. And there are some information about running a campaign involving the Ents, the Fangorn, and the missing Entwives, with a warning of breaking canon, of course. There are also audience rules for attending an Entmoot, which is pretty cool. Though I don't see... I mean, that would take a very, very long time, wouldn't it? So I feel like it would be difficult to incorporate that into a campaign, but, you know, okay. And then we got Treebird, Skinbark, and Quickbeam are detailed, but no stat blocks. Again, another missed opportunity, I think. Now, why would you want an Ent as a patron? Because you will get access to what is called the Ent Draft, which grants you advantage on strength or con ability checks or saving throws. And in addition, the first time any character drinks this Ent Draft, or draught, you gain 4 maximum hit points. So your maximum hit points go up by 4. So this is something that each player will want to do, right? So, yeah, definitely check that out. There are plenty of adventure seeds to get the company to Fangorn Forest, and several new Fellowship Phase undertakings which are pretty powerful with a lot of cool permanent boons, which require no rolls. Yeah, it's just pretty overpowered, like OP'd. Anyways, you can open Fangorn Forest as a sanctuary, or you can, this is the most important one, you can study with the Ents, which require no rolls, and it opens up 2 more Fellowship Phase undertakings for the next Fellowship Phase. The Roots of the World, where you can gain beast lore or herb lore specialties. Or you can spend 3 Fellowship Phases, like 3 years, or 3 seasons, and you can learn old lore. And finally, there's also the Song of the Forest. That's the second one that's connected to Study with the Ents undertaking, and you can gain advantage on survival checks while in the forest, and that's, you know, most of them, right? And there is no limit on how many sort of Ent courses a hero can take, and since all of these undertakings grant permanent boons, you know, what are you waiting for? Get your get your ass here. Anyways, after Fangorn Forest, there is a small part of a small chapter on Dunland, or Dunland, which includes a new culture, Dunlending. So it's a new playable culture. It's pretty run-of-the-mill stock culture, but I really liked one of their cultural heirlooms, which is the Heartseeker Spear. Where a 1-roll attack roll counts as a critical hit instead of a failure. Or in my campaign, if you roll a 1, you roll again. If you roll another 1, it's a fumble and something really bad can happen. And the chapter after that is what many of you have been waiting for. One of the most important chapters in this book. This is Isengard. And this chapter comes with the usual stuff: history, combat scenery for battles, notable places, and some information about entering Isengard. So Saruman at this point, or actually he hasn't been very fond of visitors in the 200 years he has lived in Isengard, but especially now as his descent into darkness and evil starts, secrecy becomes increasingly more important, of course. So remember that at this time he is still basically a good guy, but he has started to descend into darkness. So basically, if you want to enter Isengard, you'll have to either fight your way through his guards, manning the ring wall, or you have to be invited by Saruman, or characters who have the Emissary of Saruman title can get in. It's also possible to accompany someone who has access, for example, like Gandalf. But even after the year 2990, the only way to enter is with Gandalf. And only at night, because the changes he is making to the fort can be disguised at night. you remember he would be building furnaces, and he's preparing to arm all these forces, the Isengard orcs and whatnot. So yeah, it's a very cool read, actually, even if you're not going to play. But he will start to prepare for the manufacturing of weapons and all of that stuff. And if you are, I don't want this video to be too long. I probably failed in that already, but rest assured that all the info you need on Isengard is here. The Palantir, a map of Orthanc, the Saruman corruption timeline is a really cool read. And how to gain Saruman as a patron and what it would be like working for him, the magic and ring making of Saruman. There are a couple of Fellowship Phase undertakings at Isengard as well. You can receive the aforementioned titled Emissary of Saruman, and you can learn lore from Saruman. And this is basically, if you ask about information of a ring, some sort of ring, like an artifact or something, he will actually buy it from you. So this is a very good adventure seed. He can send you out to find these artifacts, and he will buy them from you, as long as it's a ring. The last chapter is Dangers of the Mark, which is sort of like a bestiary. It includes stat blocks for 20 new foes, including bears, different kinds of orcmen, goblin men, half-orcs, several different huorns, which are like evil trees, like evil ents, kind of. Trolls, dead men of Dunharrow, defenders of Isengard, and wargs. And Dunlending raiders. Interesting note is that half-orcs weren't mentioned at all, I think, in the Peter Jackson movies, and only briefly in the books. Just a few sentences, if that. They were mentioned like in the appendices and like sort of the surrounding writings of the trilogy, but not in the trilogy itself, I don't think. I could be wrong, of course, but it's nice to see them fleshed out here. And even though Iron Crown Enterprises MERP did flesh them out already, it was nice to see them here too. And the last chapter, or it's almost like an appendix, it's all about horses and how to acquire them, and it's a much needed addition to the 5e mounted combat rules. Attacking horses, etc. There's also a very useful Fellowship Phase undertakings for the Riders of Rohan called Riddermark Horse Training, where you can give your mount a quality, which is kind of like a feat, including fiery, night-eyed, proud, strong, sturdy, sure-footed, swift, tireless, and trample. So you can sort of, teach your horse tricks, which is pretty cool. And the last appendix is, as usual, a journey event table tailored for Rohan, including dozens of adventure seeds. All in all, I think this was a great supplement, and definitely useful with its 19 new Fellowship Phase undertakings, 20 new foes. Oh, there's also a new herb I forgot to mention. There's mounted combat and lots of expanded rules on horses and things like that. It's too bad it never saw a physical release, but I guess that's life. Oh, this video is already too long. I tend to go into way too much detail, so anyways, would I recommend it? Yeah, it's a bitch to print and bind, but yeah, I would recommend it. If you have all the other stuff, I would recommend it. But I don't think you can get it now, because I don't think it's available anymore. And obviously, since it's a PDF, the second-hand market, I'm not sure how that works. So anyways, yeah, I'll see you in next episode. See ya!